Sir, my mother has one too. I didn't mean to say it out loud. The words slipped before I could stop them, hanging between us like something fragile and dangerous. His hand froze midair, the crystal glass just inches from his lips. For a second, the entire room kept moving. Laughter, music, the soft clink of silverware, but he didn't. And neither did I. I had been serving tables for 6 hours straight, my feet aching in cheap black heels, counting down the minutes until I could go home. Men like him didn't exist in my world. Tailored suit, perfect posture, the kind of presence that made people step aside without being told. I only looked because of the ring. Gold, heavy, old, not flashy, not new. Intentional. My mother kept one, just like it hidden in a wooden box under her bed. She never wore it, never explained it, just told me not to touch it. Ever. I shouldn't have said anything. I knew that the second his eyes lifted to mine. They weren't just sharp, they were searching. Like he was trying to place me somewhere I didn't belong. What did you say? His voice was calm. Too calm. I swallowed, suddenly aware of how small I felt standing in front of him. It looks like one my mom has. Probably nothing. I tried to laugh it off, but it came out thin. Unconvincing. He didn't smile. He didn't move. He just stared at me like I had just rewritten something in his world without permission. And then I saw it. The shift. Not anger. Not curiosity. Something deeper. Something that made the color drain from his face, just slightly, like he had seen a ghost he thought he buried years ago. My heart started pounding for no reason I could explain, because that wasn't how powerful men reacted to coincidences. That was how they reacted to truths they weren't ready to face. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't about a ring anymore. He did not look away. That was the first thing I noticed. Most men would have laughed it off, brushed it aside, gone back to their evening. But he did not. His eyes stayed on me like I had just said something I was not supposed to know. Where did your mother get it? The question came too quickly, too sharp. Not curiosity, urgency. I hesitated, because suddenly this did not feel like small talk anymore. I do not know, I said, more quietly this time. She has had it for as long as I can remember. His jaw tightened, just slightly, like he was holding something back. The music in the room swelled again, conversations resumed, but around us, it felt muted, contained, like we were standing inside a separate moment no one else could see. I shifted my weight, suddenly aware that I was still holding the wine bottle, still standing too close to someone I did not understand. It is probably just similar, I added, trying to regain control of the situation. A lot of rings look alike. That was when he finally moved, not away. Closer, just enough that I could catch the scent of his cologne, clean and expensive, but not overwhelming. Intentional. Everything about him was intentional. No, he said quietly. They do not. The certainty in his voice made my chest tighten. Because he was not guessing. He knew, or at least he believed he did. And somehow, that belief was more unsettling than anything else. I felt something shift again. Not in him, in me. Because for the first time since this started, I realized I was not just talking to a powerful man. I was standing in front of a question I had never thought to ask before. Where did my mother get that ring? I opened my mouth to say something else, anything to break the tension, but he spoke first. What is your name? It sounded simple, polite even, but the way he asked it made it clear. This was not a conversation that was going to end when I walked away. And that was the moment I understood. I might not be able to walk away at all. Claire Bennett, I said, and the moment my name left my mouth, I wished I could take it back. He repeated it under his breath, slower, like he was testing how it felt. Claire. Not polite, not casual, intentional. Everything about him was still too controlled, except for one thing. His eyes. They kept searching my face like they were looking for something specific. Something I did not understand. And your mother? He asked. I hesitated again, but this time it was different. Not fear. Instinct. The kind that tells you to be careful without knowing why. Evelyn, I said finally. Evelyn Bennett. The reaction was immediate, subtle but unmistakable. His fingers tightened slightly around the glass. His shoulders stilled, and for a brief second, the mask he had been holding so perfectly in place slipped. I saw it then. Recognition. Not full, not certain, but enough to shake him. That was when the balance shifted. Because up until now, he had been the one asking questions, the one in control. But suddenly, I was the one holding something he needed. Why? I asked before I could stop myself. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Why does that matter? He did not answer right away. His gaze dropped for a fraction of a second, then returned to mine, sharper this time. Measured. Calculating again. Like he had already decided what he would and would not say. Because, he said slowly, there are not many people in this city who would recognize that ring. That did not feel like an explanation. It felt like a warning. A quiet one. The kind you only notice if you're already paying attention. I felt my heartbeat pick up again, not from fear this time, but from something else. Curiosity. The kind that pulls you forward even when you know you should step back. My mother never talks about it, I said, more to myself than to him. She keeps it hidden, like it means something she does not want to remember. He went completely still at that. Not just tense. Still. And that was when I understood something I had not seen before. This was not just about recognition. This was about history. His, mine, maybe both. And whatever that history was, it had just stepped back into the room with us. He set the glass down without drinking. That was the first crack I could see clearly. A man like him did not leave things unfinished. Not conversations. Not gestures. Not control. And yet there it was. A small break in a pattern that suddenly felt very real. Where is she now? He asked. Not if. Not could be. Where? Like he had already accepted something neither of us had said out loud yet. I blinked, caught off guard by how direct it was. At home, I guess, I said slowly. What? His gaze did not soften. It sharpened. Does she still have it? The question landed heavier than the others. Not curious anymore. Focused. Like the answer mattered more than anything else in this room. I nodded before I could stop myself. Yes. She keeps it in a box. She never wears it. His jaw flexed slightly, and for a second, I thought he might say something else. Something bigger. But instead, he went quiet again. Thinking. Calculating. Rebuilding whatever control he had lost. I should have stepped back then. I should have finished pouring the wine, excused myself, and walked away like none of this had happened. That was what any reasonable person would do. But I did not, because something inside me had already shifted. The question was no longer why he cared. It was why I suddenly did. You know her, I said, more certain this time. Not a guess. A realization. His eyes flicked to mine, quick and sharp. Not denial. Not confirmation. Something in between. I knew someone who wore that ring, he said carefully. The way he chose his words told me everything. He was not lying, but he was not telling the whole truth either. And you think that someone is my mother. It was not a question. The silence that followed felt louder than the entire room. Around us, people kept moving. Waiters passed by. Glasses clinked. Music played, but none of it reached me anymore. Because in that moment, it felt like the entire night had narrowed down to this one possibility. He studied me again, slower this time. Not just my face, my posture, my voice, the way I held my breath without realizing it. And then he said something that made everything tilt just slightly off balance. I think, he said quietly, your mother knew exactly what that ring meant. A chill ran through me, sharp and unexpected, because that was not just a statement. That was a suggestion that whatever my mother had been hiding, it was not accidental. And for the first time in my life, I realized I did not actually know her as well as I thought I did. I should have stopped talking. I felt that instinct rise again, stronger this time, like something deep inside me was trying to pull me back before I stepped too far into something I did not understand. But instead, I leaned in, just slightly, enough to show I was not going to pretend this was nothing anymore. Then tell me what it means, I said. My voice was quiet, but it did not shake. That surprised me, because everything else inside me felt unsteady. He did not answer right away. Of course he did not. A man like him did not give information. He controlled it, measured it, decided who deserved to hear it. And right now, I was not supposed to be one of those people. I could see that clearly, but something had already gone wrong for him. Something about me had disrupted whatever careful boundaries he lived behind. You are asking the wrong question, he said finally. His tone had shifted again, colder, more controlled, like he had rebuilt the wall I saw crack just minutes ago. That was the second shift. The power moving back toward him. But not completely. Not anymore. Because I knew something now. I knew I mattered to this conversation in a way he did not expect. Then what is the right one? I asked. He held my gaze for a long second. Not dismissing me. Not ignoring me. Evaluating. Like I had just crossed a line, and he was deciding whether to pull me back or let me keep walking. The right question, he said slowly, is why your mother kept something she should have never had. The words landed heavier than anything he had said before. Not because they were loud, but because of what they implied. I felt my stomach tighten, because suddenly this was not about coincidence anymore. This was about choice. My mother's choice. And choices meant intention. You are wrong, I said quickly, almost automatically. She would not. I stopped myself, because even as I said it, I realized something that made the words feel weaker. I did not actually know that. I had never asked her about the ring. Not really. I had accepted her silence like it was normal, like it was nothing. And now, standing here, I could feel that assumption slipping. You are sure about that? He asked, and this time there was something different in his voice. Not pressure, not threat, something closer to quiet certainty. Like he already knew the answer. And I did. Not. That was when the balance shifted again. Not between us. Inside me. Because for the first time, I was not defending my mother. I was questioning her. And that realization hit harder than anything he could have said. I looked down for a second, trying to steady my thoughts, trying to find something solid to hold on to. But there was nothing. Just fragments. A lockbox. A ring she never wore. The way she would change the subject every time I got too close. Small things. Things I had ignored. Until now, when I looked back up, he was watching me differently. Not like I was a stranger anymore. Not like I was just a waitress who said the wrong thing. But like I had become something else. Something connected. Something dangerous in a way I did not yet understand. I need to see it, he said quietly. The request should have sounded simple. But it did not. It sounded like a decision. And for some reason, I knew this was the moment everything was about to change. I should have said no. The answer formed instantly in my mind, clear and logical. No, you cannot come to my home. No, you cannot see something my mother has kept hidden my entire life. No, this conversation ends here. But the word never made it past my lips, because the way he said it was not forceful. It was not a demand. It was quiet, certain, like he had already stepped into a future where this was going to happen, and I was just catching up. That is not something I can just show you, I said instead, try to regain some ground. My voice was steady again, but inside, everything felt like it was shifting too fast. He did not react the way I expected. No frustration, no pressure, just a slight tilt of his head, like he was reconsidering me. Not dismissing, recalculating. I am not asking you to bring it here, he said calmly. I'm asking you to let me see it. The difference should not have mattered, but it did, because one felt like control, the other felt like involvement, and somehow, that made it harder to refuse. I crossed my arms without realizing it, a small barrier between us. You are a stranger, I said. You cannot expect me to just trust you. Because of a ring. His gaze dropped briefly to my arms, then back to my face. Not offended, not surprised, just aware. You already trusted me enough to speak, he replied. That was not an accident. That stopped me. Because he was right. I cannot explain why I had said anything in the first place. Why that moment had felt different from every other table I had worked tonight. It should have been just another interaction, but it was not. That does not mean I trust you, I said, quieter now. More honest. It means something caught my attention. Exactly, he said. And now it has mine. The way he said it shifted something again. Not threatening. Not possessive. Focused. Like I had become a problem he needed to understand. Or a piece of something he had been missing. I felt my heartbeat pick up again, not from fear, but from the weight of what this could mean. Because if he was right, if this was not coincidence, then whatever my mother had hidden, it was not small. It was not forgettable. It was something that had found its way back. Through me. I looked at him, really looked this time. At the precision in his posture. The control in his voice. The way nothing about him felt accidental. And I realized something that made my chest tighten. If I walked away now, I might never get answers. But if I did not, I might not like what I found. I get off at 11. I heard myself say. The words felt heavier than they should have, like I had just made a choice without fully understanding it. His expression did not change much, but I saw it again. That small shift, that moment where control slipped just enough to reveal something real underneath. "I will be waiting," he said, and for some reason, I knew he already had been. The rest of my shift passed in a blur I could not fully remember. Orders came in. Plates went out. Voices filled the room, but none of it stayed with me. My mind kept circling back to him. The way he had said my name. The way he had looked at me like I was something he had been searching for without knowing it. That was not normal. Nothing about this was normal. I dropped off a tray at table 14 and nearly forgot to collect the check. My manager gave me a look from across the room, sharp and questioning, but I forced a small nod and kept moving. I could not explain it. I had worked double shifts before. I had dealt with difficult customers, long nights, exhaustion that made everything feel distant. But this felt different, focused, like something had locked into place without my permission. And no matter how much I tried to shake it off, it stayed. At 10:57, I checked the time again. 3 minutes left. My hands felt colder than they should have, even under the warm lights of the dining room. I told myself I could still walk away. I could clock out, grab my bag, and leave through the back exit like I always did. I could go home, pretend none of this had happened, and wake up tomorrow to the same life I had yesterday. That option was still there. I knew it was. But the more I thought about it, the less real it felt. Because walking away would not erase what he said. It would not erase the way my mother had always avoided that subject. It would not erase the feeling that something important had just surfaced, something I had ignored for years without realizing it. At 11 o'clock, I signed out. The pen felt heavier in my hand than usual. Final, like a line being drawn. I grabbed my coat from the back room, slipping it over my uniform, and paused for just a second. That was the last moment I had to change my mind. The last moment where everything could still stay simple. I exhaled slowly and pushed the door open. The night air hit me immediately, cooler than I expected, carrying the distant hum of the city. Cars moved past in steady lines. Streetlights cast long shadows across the sidewalk. And there he was, exactly where he said he would be, standing near the curb, hands in his coat pockets, like he had not moved at all, not pacing, not checking his phone, just waiting. Him, slower than I meant to. Each one felt heavier than the last. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew this moment mattered more than I could fully understand yet. He did not greet me, did not ask if I had changed my mind. He simply reached for the passenger door of a black car parked at the curb and opened it. Smooth, quiet, certain, like this next step had already been decided. I stopped just short of the door, my hand tightening slightly around the strap of my bag. "This does not mean I trust you," I said, needing to hear it out loud, needing to hold on to something that still felt like mine. He looked at me, steady and unreadable. "It means you want the truth," he replied. And for the first time that night, I did not argue, because deep down I knew he was right. I hesitated for 1 second longer than I should have, my fingers tightening slightly around my bag strap, like I could anchor myself to the version of my life that still made sense. But then I stepped forward and slid into the passenger seat before I could change my mind again, the door closing behind me with a soft, final sound that felt louder than it should have, like something sealing into place. And as he walked around the front of the car, calm, unhurried, I had the strange, unsettling realization that he was not wondering if I would get in. He had known I would, and that certainty stayed with me as he settled into the driver's seat and started the engine, the city lights reflecting briefly across his face before fading as we pulled away from the curb. Neither of us speaking at first, the silence not awkward but deliberate, like both of us were adjusting to the weight of what this moment meant. And I found myself watching the road ahead, even though my attention kept drifting. Back to him, to the steady way he drove, to the complete absence of hesitation in anything he did, like every movement had already been decided long before it happened. And that was when it hit me. This was not new for him, this kind of situation, this kind of control, but for me, it was the first time I had ever stepped into something I could not predict. "You do this often?" I asked quietly, breaking the silence more for myself than for him, and he glanced at me briefly, just long enough for me to see that faint shift in his expression again. Not annoyance, not amusement, something closer to recognition. Drive? He asked, and I shook my head slightly. No, take people into situations they do not fully understand. I clarified, and this time there was a pause before he answered. Not long, but noticeable, like he was deciding how honest to be. Only when it matters. He said finally, and the simplicity of that answer settled heavier than I expected, because it implied something I was not sure I was ready to accept, that I mattered in this, that this was not random, and that realization made my chest tighten slightly as I looked back out the window, watching the familiar streets begin to change, the buildings less crowded, the traffic thinning, the city shifting into quieter neighborhoods I recognized, which should have made me feel better, but it did not, because now this was getting closer to something real, something personal. You already knew my name before I said it, did you not? Settled deep, uncomfortable, and undeniable at the same time, because it meant I was already part of this, whether I wanted to be or not. And as the car slowed in front of my building, a place that had always felt small but safe, I felt something shift inside me again. Not fear, not exactly, but awareness, because this was where two worlds were about to collide, the one I had always known, and the one I had just stepped into without fully understanding. And when the engine went quiet and the lights dimmed, he looked at me again, not with urgency, not with pressure, but with that same steady focus that had followed me since the moment I spoke. Claire, he said, my name's softer this time, like it carried something heavier than just a word. Once I see that ring, things will not go back to the way they were. And I felt my breath catch slightly because deep down I already knew that was true. I had known at the moment I opened my mouth earlier that night, but hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way I could not ignore. And as I reached for the door handle, I realized something that made my chest tighten just a little more. I was not sure if I was bringing him into my world or if I had already stepped into his. I pushed the door open, the cool night air brushing against my face again, but it did not feel the same as before because this time I was not stepping out of something, I was stepping deeper into it. And I could feel that difference in every movement as I walked toward the entrance of my building, aware of him behind me, without needing to turn around, aware that whatever distance existed between us physically did not matter anymore, because he was already part of this moment in a way I could not undo. And for a brief second, I paused at the door, my hand hovering just above the handle, that same instinct returning one last time, telling me I could still stop this, still walk inside alone, still pretend none of this had followed me home. But the thought felt weaker now, thinner, like something I no longer fully believed in, so I opened the door and stepped inside, hearing his footsteps follow a second later, steady and unhurried, like he had crossed thresholds like this 1,000 times before, the hallway lights flickering softly as we moved toward the elevator, the silence between us shifting again, not tense, not empty, but charged like something was building just beneath the surface. And when the elevator door slid closed, enclosing us in that small space, I felt it more clearly, the proximity, the weight of everything unsaid, and I realized something that made my chest tighten slightly. This was the first time I had ever brought someone like him in my world, and somehow it felt like he already knew it better than I did. Second floor, I said quietly, pressing the button before he could ask, needing to hold on to at least that small piece of control, and he nodded once, his gaze briefly scanning the space before returning to me. Not intrusive, just aware, always aware. And when the doors opened again, I stepped out first, my steps slower now, more deliberate, because this was it, the point where curiosity stopped being abstract and became something real, something I could not take back. And as we reached my apartment door, I hesitated again, my fingers brushing against the worn wood, remembering all the times I'd stood here thinking my life was simple, predictable, safe, and how quickly that illusion had unraveled in just a few hours. I reached into my bag and pulled out my keys, the faint jingle sounding louder than it should, have in the quiet hallway. And for a moment, I just stood there, staring at the lock, because opening this door meant more than letting him inside. It meant opening something my mother had kept closed for years, something I had never questioned until now. And that realization settled deep, heavier than anything he had said. And when I finally turned the key and pushed the door open, the familiar space greeted me, Small, quiet, unchanged, and yet it felt different already, like it was no longer just mine, like something unseen had stepped in before either of us crossed the threshold. I moved inside slowly, setting my bag down without taking my eyes off him as he followed, his presence filling the room in a way that made everything feel smaller, more contained, and for the first time since this began, I felt a flicker of something I had been pushing away, not fear, but awareness of consequences, because whatever came next would not stay inside this apartment. It would reach further, deeper, into places I had never thought to look, and as I walked toward my bedroom, toward the one place I had always avoided questioning, I realized something I could no longer ignore. This was not just about uncovering the truth. It was about facing why it had been hidden in the first place. And when I stopped in front of the old wooden box tucked beneath the bed, my hand hovering just above it, I felt my breath catch slightly because in that moment, I understood something that changed everything. Whatever was inside that box, it had been waiting for this night just as much as he had.